Okay, everybody, welcome to ProfessionalQuest, the retail event. We're excited that you're all here for us today. We have a great panel, so please make sure to keep your audio muted. And if you have any questions for the panelists, please feel free to send them to us in the chat and we'll make sure that they get to the panelists. Thank you very much, and we'll go ahead and start the panel now.
Well, thank you, Kerry. Hello all, my name is Gautam Vadkepat. I'm the Associate Professor of Marketing at George Mason University and the Director for the Center for Retail Transformation. Welcome to the Retail Professional Quest, and let me begin by thanking all of you who have joined us and our esteemed panelists for taking time off to join us. Now, it's serendipity, I guess, that they must have known that we're meeting because NPR just posted this article 2 days ago, the title of which said, "Retail jobs are treated as temporary bridge to something better, but why?" And they go on, the lady goes on to post the question that, hey, what if it was not a temporary job? And my hope from this panel is just that, but people who attend the session will walk away realizing that irrespective of their taste function, be it a technology focus, be it a creative focus, be it a people focus, there's a good career to be had in retail, and all jobs in retail lead to a positive road at the end. And that's the big takeaway that I hope. So who better to kind of talk about this than the panelists that we have collected here? And so without further ado, I think we'll just walk right into it. And maybe what we can do is we'll just go alphabetically. And if you could just, by the first name, if you could just introduce each of yourselves, give us a short background of how you got into the position that you are. That would be really wonderful. And so to kick things off, Christiana Di Matteo from Under Armour. I think I butchered your last name.
Yeah, you did. But I'll help. It's Christiana Di Mattessa.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem. Happy to be here. I'm Christiana Di Mattessa. I'm with Under Armour. I've been with Under Armour about 7 years. Started my career in retail at Foot Locker. First job ever, 15 years old, with my referee jersey on, lacing up sneakers and folding oversized t-shirts. From there, through high school and into college, worked in Foot Locker Champs, Lady Foot Locker, and went into corporate after that as a marketing assistant. And left Foot Locker after 15 years to go into fashion retail with Ann Taylor and Loft, and then found my way back into the sports industry at Under Armour. So I'm happy to be here and excited to talk more about this.
Thank you, Christiana. James, the floor is yours.
Let me go off mute. Yeah, James Arcieri. I'm a worldwide director at Microsoft. Consumer goods and retail is the industry that I cover. So I'm actually on the other side of the conversation. I help customers like Christiana unlock what is the digital, initiatives that she's trying to go after, whether that is, looking at the flow of the traffic within the store and be able to understand maybe like how many people are buying certain items versus just looking at the total sales on a point of sale. Like, it's my job to help her uncover those insights. So I get to work with the data side, and I get to think about like those H2, H3, like what is going to be transformational to her business. So it's really fun, actually. How I got there, I actually first started at IBM 7 years ago, well, 10 years ago, actually. I'm dating myself now. And I always knew I wanted to work with customers, right? And so I just worked my way, eventually getting familiar with the products, in cloud computing and understanding how to sell that, how to pitch that. And I found myself by osmosis being in New York City. Financial sector was my industry. But I didn't really see the change and the impact that was happening with those customers, right? Because I'm making sure they're optimizing their infrastructure and modernizing apps. I'm not seeing it, right? I didn't see the direct impact. So I then went into the healthcare sector with Johnson & Johnson. Now it got a little bit more real for me because I got to work with customers like Janssen. They were doing hip replacements, and my grandmother had a hip replacement through them. So it was really freaking cool. But still, I wanted to be closer to, as a consumer, like an actual user of the solutions that I'm proposing. And so I found myself at Microsoft 3.5 years ago covering this particular industry. And as you can see, one of my customers is right here, Starbucks. I love them so much. I actually don't drink coffee, ironically, but there's other things I can have on their menu that aren't coffee. So I'm based out of Seattle, Washington. I've got bestbuy.com, I've got Safeway Albertsons. I've helped customers, like even you might not think of it as a retailer, but T-Mobile, right? They have 15,000 brick and mortar stores, and they had the same problem that a lot of other brick and mortar stores like Best Buy has. So it's my job to solve those problems, and that's kind of what I do. Hope that helps.
Thank you, James. Thanks. James is a Mason alumni too, right? Which is fantastic. Next, Michelle, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Bacharach. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a startup called Findmine. And we use artificial intelligence to replicate and scale the content creation and storytelling that brands and retailers are doing around their products. We specifically work in fashion, sporting goods, home, and beauty. And some of our clients include Adidas, Reebok. We work with The Gap, Athleta, and Canadian multi-brand retailer, several others as well. And what we're doing for them is essentially serving a software that is helping to show complete outfits around products in fashion or in sporting goods, to help the customer understand how to be a better version of themselves, a better tennis player, a cooler looking person that is coming from the brand of the retailer, having this kind of unique expertise in the product category that they're in. So sharing that with the consumer in a way that's scalable, because historically how that's been done is manual. So, a merchant has to build an outfit by hand and save it to the website, or a store associate has to kind of decide what goes on the mannequin in the window display when one of the products sells out. So what we're doing is a data-driven process that is actually helping to do the storytelling more in a scalable way, so it doesn't tax the time of the teams, but also then helps the consumer understand how to be successful with the products. And so what you see is the customer will buy more, they'll come back and purchase more frequently, they return less, and the retailer's gross margin can improve because we can actually make the content dynamic. And so we can improve the sell-through of individual items, take items out of rotation in assets and content if they're selling ahead of plan and about to sell out, or boost products that are selling poorly, aggregate them from the same distribution center. So there's a sustainability benefit and a lot of other fun stuff. And how I got here is it only makes sense in retrospect. And it's one of those things that when I was going through my career, I had no idea how one thing was going to tie to the next. But I started my career in the Bay Area working in startups. I was a product manager and user experience analyst. And so I was looking at data and like how users were getting from point A to point B and figuring out how to use technology to take friction out of that user experience. Then I took a brief detour to LA to be a professional actress. Then I went to business school and I got my master's at NYU. And that's what brought me out to New York. And I wanted to focus on the entertainment industry. So I specialized in entertainment, media and technology, and graduated, went to work at Univision, which is the Hispanic media company headquartered here in New York. And I was in corporate strategy for them. One of my strategy projects had me going back into product management side and working with the technical teams and designers and developers to launch user experiences. And then kind of all throughout my time from business school to that point, I'm a consumer too. I'm a normal person who lives a life. And so I was buying products and then feeling like, well, wait a minute, I don't know how to wear the skirt. Can't the brand just tell me how? Or, I just got this couch and does it go with the end table I already have? Like, I'm not really a great interior designer. Can't they just help me be better at that? And so through that process, I was like a consumer experiencing friction. And as a product manager, I knew how to solve those kinds of problems. And so that's what prompted me to quit my job, start on this kind of entrepreneurial journey. And several years later, now we have, a software that's serving billion-dollar brands and retailers across the ecosystem. And I never had any experience in retail directly. So I was never, like Christiana, I wasn't working in this industry for years and kind of seeing the problems firsthand. But my training as a product manager is really all about having empathy for the end user, whether that end user is the consumer or the merchant or the marketer or store associate, who are the people who benefit from our technology. That's how I bridge the gap, and our software now is serving this specific industry because I could put myself in their shoes even if I hadn't lived in their shoes for 10 plus years previously in my career.
Thank you, Michelle. Last but not the least, Ron, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Gotham. I feel like I'm the exact opposite of James because I am the guy that is the emotional intelligence, people, zero data, lead with my gut guy. So most recently, I'm the author of the book Retail Pride, the guide to celebrating your accidental career. And so I spend a lot of my time speaking to retail teams all over the world about why it's important to take pride in growing your retail career, choosing retail as an industry, how to manage your career trajectory, brands, people. So that's today. Prior, I've spent the last 30 plus years in stores, leading stores, most recently the vice president of stores at Intermix. Prior, I ran stores for North and South America for Saint Laurent. I ran Apple stores. I helped launch West Elm. I helped launch Bonobos, and started my career at Gap. So the idea of, you can be in different product categories throughout your career, and it's actually really valuable because the skills that you learn are really wide. And retail is about leading through change, having an entrepreneurial spirit, doing whatever you need to do to make it happen. And sometimes learning different product categories actually help you become an even better leader. And so I'm really happy today and hopefully inspire a few people in your classes, Gotham, to continue their trajectory forward. Because I actually think it's never been a more interesting, probably more difficult, more exciting, more thought-provoking time to work in retail than today, literally today.
That's perfect. Perfect segue to the next question too, Ron.
Right.
Teed it up nicely out there. And so perhaps we can go to that question again for the audience. This is your time with the panelists, so feel free to shoot questions in the chat and we'll address them as is. But just to get things going, perhaps we can go around the table again and just talk about what, there's all this talk about retail not being cool and so forth. And increasingly so, and as Ron just said, we are in a really interesting time. If you're a retail, and this group is carefully curated, right? We got the retailers, we got the solution providers, and that's intentional here. Let's just go around the room and just talk about the one thing that excites you about retail, and what's the career that you've had in retail. And I'm broadly speaking, right? The solutions are also part of retail. Mm-hmm. And Christiana, maybe we'll just keep doing the same rounds.
Yeah, sure. Whoever says retail is not cool does not know what they're talking about at all. So I'll just put that out there. And I didn't get into what I do, and so I should just kind of clarify that. So I oversee direct-to-consumer marketing, and that is direct-to-consumer channels. So that is full-price stores, outlet stores, and e-commerce. As well as doing all experiences and field marketing. So I have a team that manages in-store experiences, on-site experiences, strategy, as well as big events, trade shows, tournaments, everything brand related, grassroots retail, and then field marketing. So with that being said, I told you I started my career in stores. And although we're in a world where it is digital first, that doesn't mean that retail and physical retail goes away. It means that they have to work together, right? A consumer does not see your org chart. They don't know who works on the e-com team, who works on a retail team. They see a logo. So whether they want to shop Under Armour at Amazon, Kohl's, an Under Armour brand house, or UnderArmourUA.com, then that's up to them because they only see a logo. They don't know who works behind the scenes. So I think most importantly in my role, I see where all the marketing spend goes to drive our business. And with that being said, we can put millions upon millions of dollars to drive large media campaigns, performance marketing, retention, everything we can do. And that can be broken by one poor experience in a store. People can make or break a brand. And it does not matter how loyal and passionate you are. You go in and have an experience with an Under Armour employee, then you can either go in a positive way and really, really love the brand, or you could write the brand off, right? So I think most important, and why I developed a field marketing team a couple of years ago was I wanted to plant Under Armour quarterbacks in communities that were important to our brand across the US and Latin America. And by doing that, it means they can be involved in every single community activation that aligns with our brand goals. And building those, like, by looking at that, you might figure, what does that have to do with retail? It has a lot to do with retail, because retail is not just a place to transact. I mean, it obviously is, but it's a place where you can bring a community together. So the more and more community engagement you can bring in, the more you drive a loyalty to your brand. So I think the biggest thing for me is, I can learn a lot from digital. I can test very easily in digital, and I can drive our business through technology. But at the end of the day, I have to invest heavily in people. It's a human strategy that's part of retail that is massively important, that is not going away.
Awesome. James, your thoughts?
Yeah, so two thoughts. I wanted to piggyback off of what Christiana said. She called it out perfectly regarding a positive or a negative experience. I remember back in my time at IBM, our SVP of experience basically said, the last best experience that anyone has anywhere becomes the minimum expectation for the experience they want everywhere. So, and conversely, if you go to, let's say, a Chipotle, because they're also considered retail, right? You go to Chipotle and you get food poisoning off of their food, you don't want to go back to a Chipotle, right? So every time you go to a Chipotle, you expect it to be great tasting rice. You expect it to stick at an appropriate level. You don't expect it to be dry. You don't expect the meat. So to Christiana's point, that translates across every other type of retail experience, right? If you go into a Best Buy, for example, me, like, you don't want to be stuck waiting around and hoping that someone notices you if you have questions, right? You want to be sought after. So now this is where it gets exciting, because this is when it gets into why I think retail is hella cool, right? It's actually the bleeding edge where you have to be innovative and thinking about ways to attract customers. The switching costs, or you're in business school, so the switching costs to go to, let's say, Best Buy or Amazon.com is so low. So why and how can Best Buy make itself more attractive to you? Right? It's their Geek Squad. It's their ability to provide more of a human feel and experience when you get into the store, and be able to not only tell you this goes really well based on what you want, but then also these other things go well with you, versus potentially going on Amazon and it says, okay, here's the related products. I love the cat. That's so perfect for what it is. And I'm gonna tell you right now, I work with some of the most amazing things. Like at Starbucks, they have an innovation lab. It's 24,000 square feet at their corporate headquarters, and Under Armour probably has one too, where they have like a metal shop, a woodworking shop, 3D printers, and they create mock experiences of the store. And we're doing automated dispensing using AI and figuring out how far away a person is in their car. We are doing drone delivery of coffee, or on college campuses. Or again, computer vision. You can be able to detect if a store is available. And let's say you're on your phone and you want to get the nice seat that you always like because you want to study there long term. Well, Starbucks can say, hey, this store actually has more availability for the seat you want. We'll give you a discount, because Starbucks doesn't want you waiting long in line, right? Because again, they want you to have a good experience. We're using speech to text to translate people that are hard of hearing. So that way, a barista in China who maybe doesn't speak sign language or understands how to read it, the customer can go in there and use their sign language. The camera can detect what it is and translate that back. Retail is where innovation is happening. And that's just on the front end side. I haven't even talked to you about how they're using robots and automation in the warehousing, back to Christiana's point, and detecting because she mentioned direct to consumer and in brick and mortar, that's called omni-channel. And how are you able to send that information back to each other and then send it to where maybe more customers are buying? And that's all about your supply chain predicting and forecasting. I could go on and on because I get to see it from a technology side. And it's actually at Microsoft, one of our largest industries outside of the financial sector, just because of the size of customers. Retail is the second largest and fastest growing, from a cloud consumption to all the other products that we offer. So just to give you an idea, retail is bleeding edge and has to be, because people expect more now.
That's awesome.
More competitive. Sorry, I want to get this home. It is where to be. If you want excitement, it's where you gotta go.
This is great. You know, for everyone who says retail is not innovative, that's perfect. Thank you, James. That is awesome. Retail is where innovation happens. Michelle, what makes you excited about retail?
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything that's been said already. I might not have James's. It's surprising that James doesn't drink caffeine because that seemed like a caffeinated kind of a excitement level. But yeah, I just have the cat here to amp up my side of things. She's my hype woman. But so for me, I think a couple of things Christiana said really hit home. And so one of the things I saw when I was working at Univision, and remember it's media, so we had like, you know, telenovelas that you could watch on the TV, that you could watch on like reruns on a different channel, that you could watch on your phone, on your iPad, or on your desktop computer. And like to the consumer, they don't really even notice what device they're consuming that telenovela on. It's just the show. But to Christiana's point, our org structure was set up as linear television and like digital and mobile and like desktop. And that just created such problems for this unification of the user experience. And being a product person, I'm all about taking friction out of that user experience. And so I see those silos in retail happening, and there's a disconnect between how the customer experiences the product and their journey through their consumption of a new brand or new experience or their purchase of a product, and how the organization is set up internally. And that's something that I feel like technology can bridge the gap in doing. And that's why I'm the CEO of this company and pouring my, you know, blood, sweat, and tears into something really, really hard that's never been done before, because I see the opportunity of helping the customer have that consistent experience with Under Armour, no matter if they're like getting a text message about a marketing program, or they're on the website, or they're interacting with a brand new store associate that just joined the company a couple weeks ago. So that's why our technology is really focused on consistent omni-channel storytelling, and then feeding that content into a store associate's device, so that brand new store associate on day one can have exactly the same level of skill as a stylist or an expert in an individual sport that's been working there for 10 years. It's leveling the playing field across all these experiences, so the customer gets a consistent feeling of the brand and they're helped to be more successful and live better lives. So that gets me really excited. And then the second thing is that retail is just so massive in terms of scale. Like, think about every transaction that happens every day. It's like hundreds of trillions of data points streaming constantly into like all sorts of different systems. And there's, you know, trillions and trillions and trillions of interactions that are happening individually with consumers and brands all day, every day. And there's also a lot of problems to solve in retail. So if you combine those two things together, one of the reasons innovation can be really possible and like exciting in retail is that you have this high volume of at-bats. And so you can test and learn from those tests very quickly in an environment where there's a big volume of stuff to figure out if it's working or not. You can test your hypotheses much more quickly. Financial services also has a ton of transactions, but there's also a lot of regulation. So you're not allowed to innovate in a lot of ways. Whereas retail can be, you know, with privacy and stuff sort of aside for a moment, can be much more bold about the different things that they're doing to test and learn, and the volume in which they get the responses or the answers to those hypotheses and tests is so great. So that's what really gets me excited. I think that, you know, there's a lot of industries where like people have invested in technology since the very beginning and a lot of stuff is kind of figured out. I think those are a lot less innovative places to be than an industry that has historically been a little bit behind the curve when it comes to technology and now has had to face this reckoning of customer expectation. There's a lot more autonomy and authority that I think that the average retail employee gets versus other industries where, you know, you might have a boss and a boss and the boss's boss's boss who gets to decide everything and you're getting this tiny piece of the puzzle. So from an organizational standpoint, it can be a place where you can like flex your wings a little bit more than in other industries too.
Thank you, Michelle. Ron, your thoughts, and perhaps you can also kick off once you're done with your thoughts, answer the student question that you might be seeing on screen.
I didn't see that. Okay.
But first, what makes what makes retail cool for you? I'm waiting to hear this response.
So many things that I want to add on. I love what Michelle said about the fact that it used to be very much like the boss is the boss who made decisions. Today, what's really important to a workforce and new generations that are coming into retail is that you should and can have the ability to influence change in your own company and your own four walls of your store. And so, when Christiana says, that customers don't see your org chart, they also don't see the culture and values statement likely that your company has. They don't likely know who your board of directors are. They don't know who your senior leadership team is unless they've done some homework. What they see is what they experience when they walk into the store or visit the website and the person standing in front of them. And this idea of an entrepreneurial spirit and the ability to create a business and an experience and a multi-million-dollar platform to do something that is really important, puts people to work. The statistics around the high number of people that start their work life in retail, our impact on that, our impact on local communities, all of it is really powerful. But it will always come back to what happens when the customer walks in the store. And I think for many years, we've given that power to companies, large companies, and I worked, for Gap Inc. for 15 years of my life, really one of the largest companies in the world, but had a very entrepreneurial spirit, had a very much an embrace diversity, embrace change, think about what's new and next, not always from a technology standpoint, but certainly from a people standpoint. And we today, what excites me is we have the ability to kind of rebuild what this industry looks like, using kind of in a very human-centric way that is very tech-enabled and very community-based and very product-focused. And those things are really, really exciting to me.
Awesome. Thank you, Ron. I was just informed that only I can see the student question.
I was going to say, I'm a little bit lost, but I'm happy to answer it.
So the question was, most of retail is small and medium-sized retail. Right? Statistics range from 90 to 95% of retail is small and medium-sized. So the question is, what can small businesses do in order to compete with bigger businesses, where bigger businesses is less expensive than smaller businesses who can't afford to keep their prices low?
I mean, I'm happy to take a stab and turn it over. The idea here of an experience drives perception of value. And just because you can't keep your price low, don't be afraid of that. And so I would go back to my own experience leading Intermix, that is a medium-sized business with 31 stores. It is a higher price point and primarily full price, but we were highly committed to the customer experience, whether that is through chat on the website, through in-store experiences, through consignment businesses, through events, local charities, whatever was important to that particular community and that market and that product assortment. That's how you become a powerful influence in your local community. And you don't actually need to be a large company. What you need is a commitment to do the right thing in the city where you're located. And that impact is really powerful and actually becomes less about price and more about emotional impact.
Thank you. Any other thoughts?
I mean, just to add on to that, I mean, it's, I've heard this been said a couple of times, but it's not about marketing to people. It's about mattering to people. And I think that's, that's an opportunity, especially small to medium-sized businesses. And I think that, yes, like larger businesses have bigger budgets to spend, but in order to make changes, there's a lot of red tape to go through. And there's also it costs a lot of money to make a change. If you want to change a POS system in a retail store and you have 500 locations, that's a lot more than if you have 10 locations, right? So there are challenges on the bigger side when you're a bigger retailer. But I think the important thing is the way you're going to continue to evolve in retail is failing fast and failing intelligently. And that is a challenge in a bigger retailer, because just like I said, you have to go through a lot of red tape in order to test things. You have to get approvals, executive sign off on what you want to test. Whereas smaller startup companies, and when I came to Under Armour, it was very much the same way. You got an idea? Great, let's do it. Let's see what happens. But you have to make sure that, you know, your idea has landing gear, right? Like you have to have a way to test, explain what you're testing, and also be able to have data that you can understand. Because I think the thing here is, like, I very much like Ron, like I like to go on, based on my experience in working in stores and my experience over the years, what do I like, go with my gut a little bit more. I like to back it by data and insights, but you know, you can get different pieces of data, but that doesn't mean it's real, right? Insights are what's real. That is when you see repetitive data over and over again, that's an insight, that's what you action on, right? So I think what is interesting as smaller businesses is you can start to learn and see different data points, and then you can pull the insights and say, I want to quickly act on this and I want to change my business. Where bigger companies doesn't have the flexibility to do that.
Any other thoughts? We got questions coming in, so I can go to the next
If I can
question.
just tag on to what Christiana said as well. There's also really incredible new like startup tech happening that is much easier to integrate into smaller brands. So for example, you know, certainly chat functions, clienteling apps. I'm working with a couple different startups on the people side, kind of embracing the gig economy, you know, thinking about 70 million people in the US currently consider themselves independent workers. How do we embrace that in retail? So there's some new platforms around, kind of retail workforce on demand. And what can that look like? There's new ideas around virtual hiring and video-based ideas. There's all kinds of new tech that is much easier to integrate when you have 5 stores or 1 store. Like they'll give you a free pilot, I can almost guarantee. And like, hey, test, learn, give us feedback. We'll let you run with it. Let you test your live shopping platform for free for a month. Pretty much anyone's going to do that today for a small brand. So there's definitely perks there.
I think I would add too, I think it's a great delineation between, you don't just have to go work for a name brand like Gap if you want a career in retail to start, right? And to the point, you may encounter some friction, whereas when you're working in a startup, maybe you want that environment, right? And so like Microsoft, we work with a lot of retail startups that are hyper-focusing in areas like drone delivery, because we don't have drones, but we have the platform that it sits on. Back to Christiana's point, when we're working with a Starbucks, it takes like 6 months to do a security review because the data that's being shared. So, but that doesn't mean though you can't work on the type of experience that you want to solve for. And so there's a couple websites I'll send to Gotham to share with y'all. If you want to start finding the startups in retail, I mean, obviously you could try to Google startups in retail, but NRF, National Retail Federation, there's going to be a lot of startups mentioned there that are bleeding edge, that are actually working with partners. You can go to Grocery Shop, which I was just at in Las Vegas. That's for like a Safeway Albertsons and a Walmart, and all the startups are there. So you can, if you want an aspect in it, you can be on obviously merchandising and buying, but also there's the whole technology side, and retailers are realizing they have to accept that they are a digital company and they have to make sense of the data to be more competitive, to be more personalized in their recommendations to the customer. Nowadays, everyone wants personalization, but how do you do personalization at scale? Well, that's then when you bring in like a Microsoft that helps you with the platform, and then that syncs with a Michelle's company, because she's going to handle that specific tactical problem, like you mentioned in the mannequins, right? So I would tell you there's a lot of opportunities there. I think that's our audience today we're trying to talk to. If you haven't already heard it, retail's more than the point of sale. It's more than just going into a store and inserting your credit card. I hope you understand that right now. And that it's not just going to a Starbucks to get a job. It's not just going to Gap, but there are a lot of really innovative companies that are doing robotics, that are doing intelligent personalization recommendations. There's like digital fashion companies out there too. It's really freaking cool. So that would be my extra 2 cents to just encourage people that it's more than just walking into your retailer. There's so much behind the scenes that make that a reality.
So we had another question that comes in. We have a lot of students who are entrepreneurial. And the next question along the same lines is, for someone who's starting a small business, what are the key things to attract new clients? And I think you might have alluded to some of this, the customer intimacy, kind of leveraging technology, but is there anything else that comes up? It's open to the panel, anyone who wants to take a shot at it before we move to the career advice section.
I can add in some stuff that I've been pushing a little bit on my team. So, I'm sure everyone here knows about influencers and everyone knows about social media. And a lot of people on this call have probably purchased something they were influenced by online. I think what is very interesting is like there's levels of influencers, right? And I think once you get to a certain level of an influencer that has a certain bigger following, they want, right? And they, it's their job. And I understand that. But you kind of lose some loyalty there. And with that being said, I started on my team a micro influencer program, which means I told my team, that the field marketing team, I said, I need you to select people in your market that are influential in the market. That doesn't mean they have 50,000 followers. That means they're a trainer at the local gym. They're a mother that leads a mom's workout club, right? There's a jump rope workout instructor, whatever that may be. These people are influencers in the market, and an athletic director. And those people are way more loyal and way more willing to support our brand and not just say, what do I get out of it, right? And that's the important thing when we talk about relationships and community relationships. Most importantly, we don't make decisions that only benefit us. Like if someone comes to us and they want to do something and it's a win for us, but not a win for the partner, or it's a win for them and not a win for us, we won't act on it. We have to find a way to be beneficial for both, because then it's not going to be successful. So I think what is really important is, if you're small, how do you embed yourself in your community and find a way to leverage those partners in the community to help push your message and your brand out there.
That's great advice. Any other thoughts?
Just add to that to make sure that you're like telling a consistent story when you have that message that hooks the customer, and then the place that they land when they click through or when they go to like continue on their purchase journey. You can't give them like really cool, inspirational social media post that's like the thing that got them to click, and then just dump them in a product page that's like completely generic. Like personalization isn't just about product recommendations and showing them, like you might also like these other shoes. It's about recognizing where they came from. So if everyone's talking about the Met Gala, get in on the conversation about the Met Gala, but then make sure that when they click through to the product or to the website, you're still talking about the Met Gala for that person on the website. Otherwise, like your conversion rate's going to drop off incredibly. And we did some work recently with a multi-brand retailer of ours that sells like formal wear. And they were doing this series of like, remember how to get dressed for a wedding? Because like we haven't been to weddings in a year and a half. And they had really specific, like what to wear to a barn wedding, what to wear to a beach wedding. And they like made it really, really specific. They inserted themselves in the conversation. I think June was the biggest like time for people to get married in like modern history or something crazy like that. And so we were able to help them fulfill those campaigns by making the landing page match the feeling of the conversation that the customer came from. So it's not just about like how to get them, but then how to keep them engaged throughout the rest of the journey. And a lot of times people are so focused on like, what is that clickbait, that hook that's going to get them in the door, or the influencer who's going to like push them to my website, but you still have to receive them. You still have to carry them through their journey. And then post-purchase too. So if you spend all that time and energy acquiring the customer and they only buy from you once, you're so much worse off than if you had fewer customers that were more loyal over the long term.
I would just add, Gautam, to that, and those are all incredible points about client acquisition. I think from an student entrepreneur point of view, it's also really important to grow your own network and kind of what those potential mentorships could look like, the people around you that can also help you grow, that you don't have to do this alone, that there is expertise everywhere you turn. And my experience has shown, you and I spend a lot of time on Clubhouse, sometimes together, sometimes not. We bounce into each other, but I host, moderate designer pitch rooms often. And so new startups, new designers, new entrepreneurs come in, best pitches are winning some investment. We have funds going on for some of these new startups. There's a lot of action happening, but you have to kind of dig and find it. But Clubhouse is a really good example. Of course, LinkedIn, there's a lot of activity. That don't be afraid to reach out and say, hey, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I'd love to meet you. I'd love to have a 15-minute conversation. Your network is as important as you grow your customer base, because this is a lifelong investment.
Thank you. James, you had something?
Yeah, I wanted just to clarify, because depending on the clarification, I was going to add some coloring there. Is the question about how they start getting their first customer, are they like a retailer? Is it a startup in technology?
It's a retailer. It reads a retailer.
Like a clothing brand?
Yeah.
All right, so then I won't add, the other people have already done really well there. If it's technology, I got you. I know how to sell to getting enterprise. I can help you there.
Well, maybe you can take a second, because I want to pivot to the career advice sections really soon. So if you just take a second, James, to see if there's one quick takeaway that if you're a technology startup, what could you do to get the first client?
Well, okay, so I'm actually also working on my own startup on the side in enterprise. And so one of the first things, obviously, back to Ron's point, is you lean in on your network, right? I have friends that work at these other big companies. I reached out to them. I said, hey, look, I want to prove out my product. Can you help me user test it? Can you help me validate the product features to make sure it's a product market fit that lands? And then once you have product market fit, that still doesn't get you in the door. People then have to say, is the price point to acquire worth it for me, right? And so then you have to figure out, is the problem you're solving, what is the monetary value associated to it? What are they currently doing today? That's the friction. And then how are you helping in the future experience solve for it, but then bringing them an ROI, whether it's cost savings or revenue. So whether you're a big company or a small company, people need to know it's going to help them from a financial standpoint too, right? And so you have to do that calculations. If you haven't done that, you're setting yourself up for failure. But even if it means some napkin math conversation starting points, that's all you need. You just get the conversation starting, because you probably don't know all the customers' data, right? But at least go with maybe industry trends and say, hey, here's what we've understood. Here's our assumption. Can you validate this? Because that's where it moves the ball forward, at least.
Awesome. Thank you. We got a few questions. The students have decided to ask you a few career questions. So a couple of questions that have popped up. One is, how valuable is internship experience? What do you recommend for students to prepare for in a career?
Well, I can chime in. I never had an internship. I worked in retail since 15 years old, and which is actually why I'm even involved in this program in the first place, because when I was in retail and going through college, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to work for a sneaker brand, and I wanted to help sell shoes. That's what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to work in a store. I wanted to work for a retailer or a brand, right? With that being said, what I had to go to get anyone to even acknowledge me, and this was pre-LinkedIn, right? So, I mean, handwritten letters to every company out there. I mean, I worked at Foot Locker already in stores for 8 years and couldn't get them to reply back to me for a corporate entry-level role. And that's a problem, right? And I've made my career out of making sure that I'm looking at the retail teammates, because they know the consumers better than anyone else. And how am I finding a way to bridge that gap and bring them? They can't go directly into corporate. The training is just not there in retail. Like, no retail, I don't care who you are. There are no retailers out there that have taken a store manager and trained them appropriately, how to set up a WebEx meeting, how to build a PowerPoint presentation, all the basics, they're not there. There needs to be that gap. And I built a team that it's a stepping stone between retail and into corporate and training on all that stuff. But what I would want to say is that, like, all the students, you have such an opportunity with LinkedIn to make connections. I mean, my hope is when we hang up here that what do we have, 30 people on here, that I have 30 requests, because that's a social network to connect with industry professionals, right? And use that to your advantage. And to be honest, if you reach out to someone and say, hey, I'm a student and I'm interested in a career this way, I'm wondering if I could pick your brain on something, and they don't reply to you, then you know what? You don't want to talk to them anyway. Like if you're on LinkedIn, the whole point is to network. And, but with that being said, I would also say I've had my fair share of people reach out and ask a bunch of questions, like give feedback and don't get any response. No, thank you. No, nothing. Like it goes both ways. Networking is so valuable. Networking will get you the opportunity to have a seat at the table. It's up to you to close the deal, but all the connections you make will help you along the way in your career. So I would just say, like, my career advice is network, network, network. Like no matter what, and focus on communication and how you communicate to people. The other piece of advice too is that I don't think people realize how many career opportunities there are in the retail industry. And I think people was like, oh, a buyer, okay, a marketer, a visual merchandiser. I mean, I had a conversation with a store employee, first retail job ever. He said, oh, I just work here because I'm going to school for finance. I said, well, did you think about maybe a career opportunity after getting your degree in finance at Under Armour? He's like, oh, well, I want to focus on economic finance. I said, do you know what world we're living in right now? Like we have whole teams dedicated to what's happening in the world and how we're financially planning against those. So whatever you're thinking about, whether it be circular economy, sustainability, community impact, DE&I, all of this stuff, it's not just the basics of what you expect of retail. If you can dream it, it's probably a team at a retail organization.
Christiana, I just wanted to interject for 1 second. You know, there are 90 people on the call.
Oh, well,
so
I accept 90 requests then.
So I'm not sure if you wanted that, but
I
do.
I already asked the people on the team to add me on their LinkedIn network. I sent one to Christiana, Michelle, and Ron. And I want to also, I'm always picking back on Christiana because you had great points. So I love it. I agree. I don't think the term internship is maybe the appropriate work experience, right? Back to your point, like you got to have work experience. You can't wait till the summer before senior year to show that you're ready for a job. Like I started my first job when I was 12 years old, was working. And then in college, I worked at a local IP security camera company off of Chantilly Road, in Willows Road area. And that, because I needed to show I know how to work with people. I know how to do deliverables. I know how to multi-manage things at the same time. You don't have to go and be at a Fortune 500 to show you know how to work in a team, right? And so I had, I was working 35 hours a week while school, which adds to your resume. So I would tell you, if you don't have an internship right now, get one or get a job that shows that you know how to work in a team environment. That doesn't necessarily mean just take any job. Christiana already knew what she wanted to do, which is amazing. Not everyone knows, but you want to show that you know how to work with a high pressure environment. I always believe, as you can tell, I'm a seller. So I always believe in working in your first internship or ever job should try to be some type of sales role where you deal with the word no. Because if you don't know how to get told no, you're not going to survive long in the workplace. You got to know how to navigate that, right? And the same thing, Microsoft, IBM, my first job, they didn't recruit from George Mason. We were blacklisted at the time. I don't know if that's still the case, but they're going to Georgetown. So how do you compete against Georgetown? You get that resume. You say, okay, sure, this student has 4.0 GPA, but they've only done one internship. Well, James has a 3.8 GPA and has done 4 years of work experience, busting his butt. I want this person. That's how you tip the scales in your favor when you're not a target school, right? On top of that, going and doing those extracurriculars, being a leader in clubs, in organizations, showing that you have initiative and drive. Christiana is like, look, you got to bust your ass if you want to work at a good company like Under Armour, Google, Microsoft. They're not just going to hand it out. But I always do believe where one door closes, there's always a window. You build the ladder. Maybe it takes longer, get your way up there. But how I got the IBM job, I went to Indeed.com. I found an internship opportunity. This was like, again, 10 years ago. I didn't get it. I made it to the final round. But like your career services tell you, you stay on top of that recruiter. You inform them what you've been doing. Oh, I just took this leadership program. I've just done this. And guess what? Now you have a rapport and you're on their top of the list. That's how I got the job a year before I graduated at IBM. They said, hey, we want to hire you. And I'm like, I still have 1 more year left. They said, well, shift your classes tonight and you can work during the day for us remotely. I was like, done. Right. And so I was very fortunate. But then again, I busted my butt, always trying to prove myself, always taking on opportunities, the power of your network. You can't underestimate that enough. I got my job at Microsoft through LinkedIn. I was fed up at IBM at the time, and I said, I'm going to go somewhere better. And so I looked in LinkedIn and I saw someone that was a director at Microsoft in cloud computing, because that was my area at IBM. They were in New York City. We got a coffee conversation set up. And then she became my champion internally and helped refer me to roles. So again, like, you never know where the opportunities are going to help you out, but you have to be able to add value back to them. Mentoring or just this networking, it's a two-way street. And I have plenty of people that message me too all the time. James, I want career, and I offer them advice and stuff, and then they don't get back to me on the action items I've given them. You can't do that. You burned a bridge. I will never respond back to you. I'm sorry, because there's plenty of others. So that's my spiel. Michelle?
Yeah, just a couple of things to add, because all that is gold. The first one I would say is it's better to have an internship at a lesser known company where you're getting real experience than getting coffee at Nordstrom or whatever, like the, whoever you think is the pinnacle. And that doesn't even just apply to retail. Like, I had plenty of friends who had internships at Morgan Stanley, and all they did was get coffee, and they weren't allowed to do anything. And then other friends went to lesser known, hedge funds or financial services companies, and they got a lot of responsibility. So it's all about what you can put on your resume at the end of the internship or at the end of the job. And I echo the sales piece, like, just get told no a lot and learn how to deal with that. That's going to serve you so well in your career, no matter what you end up doing. Try to work with data as much as possible. So if you have, ask the questions when you're interviewing for these roles, whether they're internships or just part-time jobs, ask about what kind of duties you're going to have and responsibilities, and make sure that that's shoring up things that you want to have on your resume, and being able to process data and then synthesize it and turn it into an executive summary, like, cogently, is probably the number one thing that is a skill that will set you apart from your peers, whether it's at the undergrad level, like getting your first job out of college, or whether it's at like the post MBA level. I'm always shocked at how I'm a CEO, I'm busy, like, I got a lot of stuff going on. I need the TLDR version, and I need to know that you've done the work to make sure that, like, the data that you're using is statistically significant. Like, you have done the work, but I don't need to see how the sausage is made. So, like, just give me that really short and pithy line. But if you can do that, I think that's a really big differentiator, and that will come out in the interview process. That's not something you put on your resume as a bullet, but I think that when you're describing your internship experience, or when you're describing your work experience, being able to do that in a framework that is really easily digestible by the person who's looking to hire you is so critical, because you might be the smartest person in the world with the greatest experience, but if you can't communicate and articulate that, it's going to get lost. And then the last thing I'll say is that, so I got my MBA 10, 12 years ago now. So this might be slightly outdated information, but maybe it's still relevant, and your career counsel team can kind of guide you with it. But what I noticed is that the companies that recruit on campus in like October for the next year, or like in January for the next year, those are going to be like your big corporates, and they have a huge HR team and recruiting team, and they have enough predictability in their business to know what slots they're going to fill for summer internships or for, June start dates after you graduate. 99% of the companies in the world don't operate like that. They're so much more like what's called just-in-time hiring. So you're going to miss out on so much, but you're going to be watching your friends drop like flies going to Accenture, and no knock against Microsoft, but you guys are ones that recruit on campus. And if you're really holding out for like that particular retail job or whatever job that's not part of that on-campus recruiting process, you're going to sell yourself short. And I saw that happen so much to friends of mine in the MBA program. And I have this one friend who really wanted to work in luxury. She was dying to work in luxury retail. She didn't have a job for 6 months after graduation. And everyone was like, no one would have been able to handle that, but she held out, and she got an amazing job at Kate Spade. And now she's like a director in charge of M&A at Estee Lauder. So it paid off big time for her to do that. And a lot of other people who went to like an Accenture or whatever and said, well, I'm just going to do this for a couple of years, pay off my loans, and then go into something else. 12 years later, they're still at Accenture. And it's not like it's a bad company or anything like that, but like they missed their chance to go do a startup or do something that was a passion for them because they got cold feet and they just went with a thing that was right in front of them in October of 2012 because they felt like they needed to have a job by the time they graduated. So don't sell yourself short if you have a passion.
We're running up against time, so I'm going to throw this question to Ron, and I'm also going to open it up to one last question, which is the student question is, how do you work in corporate if you've been in retail your whole life, but you have a 4-year degree? If you've been in retail for your whole life, but you have a 4-year degree and you don't want to work in physical stores, and then we can go around the room and answer the question. But then also, I want to end on this note, right? We're in a world where, James kicked us off by saying we're at the bleeding edge. What are the new skills that the students need to have? And we'll end on that. So what does it take? How do you get into corporate if you don't want to work in the stores? And then what are the skills you need for the students moving forward?
I'm happy to start. And I love that Christiana said, that there's no clear path to do this. I think you have to find organizations that can embrace the skills that you use every day in stores and translate that in a department. I had a lot of people who worked in stores all over the country for Intermix who wanted to be a buyer. And because it just seems really glamorous and you sit front row at New York Fashion Week and you do all these really interesting things, they won't hire you. I'll tell you right now. And so the idea of these career trajectories from stores to corporate are absolutely true, but they usually come through some kind of creative path. So either finance, I've seen that happen, but I've also seen it happen more in visual merchandising roles that turn from store roles into kind of multi-store field leadership visual merchandising roles, which I had, and I became the director of visual merchandising at Gap. So there are store to corporate roles that are about functions in stores, loss prevention, store operations, visual merchandising, finance, HR. I've had people go from stores into HR as kind of HR admin into kind of HR manager roles. So there's a number of paths, but it's also the right companies that have the opportunities and that you have the physical ability to do that. But don't be afraid to articulate the skills that you've learned working in brick and mortar stores, that you run a multi-million-dollar business, you lead large teams, you customer facing. There's a lot that you do that I think we also don't always give ourselves credit for when you work in stores.
I can add to that. I actually have an example too that I want to share. I actually have an open role right now on my team, which is a role that is perfect for someone right out of retail. It's an entry-level corporate role. And I put this out there on LinkedIn to all my connections, asked for everyone to post it. I had one Under Armour retail employee apply for it. And I was shocked. Out of every single retail employee in our organization, and which even more shocked when I reached out to our field leadership team, I said, do you have anyone you can identify? I need a really strong candidate that understands retail, but has an interest in marketing. And they said, oh, I don't know, let me ask around. Here's where is an opportunity. If you work in retail, tell your manager, tell your district manager, tell your regional director, tell your head of stores, I'm going to school for this. How do I find my way into corporate? I'm willing to take an internship or an externship. Can I help with a project? What can I do? Because when opportunities like that come up and I say, hey, do you have anyone out there? They say, oh my God, Joe Smith is the one that reached out to me and said he's interested in marketing. If you don't say anything, you're not going to know what opportunities are there and they're not going to come to you. So definitely be bold and put yourself out there.
In terms of the skill to focus on, I don't have anything to add in terms of like how to get a corporate job coming from retail. I think those are great data points. But in terms of the skills to pursue, to be prepared for this kind of like bleeding edge of modern retail, I would say 2 things. One is data science. And that doesn't mean you have to go like become a data scientist, but take a statistics class, take a linear regression class, learn about like the basic concepts of testing and machine learning potentially, but you don't have to go down a huge rabbit hole into AI. There's introductory courses that can be really valuable and just working with large data sets and trying to understand numbers and run experiments. And then the second one would be, it doesn't have to be product management, but anything that helps you learn how to translate between a very technical group of people and a non-technical group of people, because there's such a large bell curve in terms of the tech savviness and comfort level. Sometimes I talk to my engineering team and I'm like, what are you talking about? And then sometimes I give like the summary level to a potential client and they're like, what are you talking about? Because they still don't understand in their terms at a high enough level. So being able to, just translate between those groups of people, no matter what your career or your role is within retail, will help you, because especially as technology is becoming such a more dominant thing, and also like a new thing in a lot of areas of retail that it didn't touch before. Before, store associates didn't really work with technology all the time, and now they have a clienteling app in their hands, or they have a voice recognition earpiece that is using AI to translate what they say. So just being able to translate between those groups and help people get comfortable with whatever is new in terms of a technology standpoint is going to be really valuable, and you'll be tapped for a lot more projects than you think, no matter what role you have.
Thank you. Christiana and Ron, do you have any last thoughts on the skills, the new skills needed? And we'll end on that note.
I think most importantly, like communication, and, depending on what your major is, it is so massively important, not just knowing how to communicate, but you individually need to have a communication strategy. How you communicate to different levels within an organization is really, really important to understand. If you're talking to the president of an organization, what do they need to know, and get it out in 5 seconds, right? If you're talking to someone where you're asking them for help on a project or whatever, you have to give them more information. Every single person needs to have their own communication strategy, because you can't communicate the same way to everyone across an industry. And I think that is something that you have to really focus on and learn about, because I don't think that it just automatically comes naturally.
Yeah,
So true.
That's
true.
Great advice. So I'm kind of building the framework and some ideas for my second book, and kind of survey people who work in retail, and I think about what do they want to learn, what do they want to hear, and the number one response is managing difficult conversations, managing conflict, managing how to have uncomfortable conversations, how to they slant more HR, but there are conversations, and I 100% agree with Christiana. Your communication style needs to be very energetic and inspiring one day, and really tough 5 minutes later. And that's a really important skill to say, you know what, today I know I'm going to need to have a tough conversation. And you may not be confident going into it. I remember many conversations that ended in termination and all kinds of things where I was like, I've never done this before, but I'm going to learn how to do this. And you stick with it and you make it happen. But don't be afraid of what's hard or messy, and because that will never go away. And the more comfortable you are in kind of the uncomfortable human part of business, whether you work in corporate or not. Actually, I think people in corporate are often even less comfortable because you can sit at your desk and you don't actually have to have the conversation. In retail, we're like around each other all day. You have to do it. But don't be afraid of it, and lean in and listen and learn, and find mentors that can help you do that.
That's great advice, right? We need to be technologically savvy. We need to build on our communication skills. We need to have empathy and be able to build those relationships. Thank you, all of you, for being here. I appreciate your time. Very, very useful. And if you're all open to being connected on LinkedIn, I'm sure there'll be students who are going to barge in and knock on your doors. Thanks once again. Appreciate it.
Would welcome it.
Have a
Thanks,
good
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck.